Hey everyone, Ryan here at eTrailer. Today on our 2016 Subaru Forester, we're going to be showing you how to install the CURT Trailer Hitch Receiver. Before we do that though, let's take a minute, check this out, and make sure it's going to be the right hitch for you. So when it comes to putting a hitch on a vehicle like the Forester, it makes a lot of sense. They're really capable and people use them to do a lot of different things. So if you plan on pulling a trailer around or using different types of accessories or a little bit of both, you're going to want a hitch that'll be up to the task, and this one here will definitely get the job done for you. There are several hitches available for the Forester, and they're all going to be pretty similar in terms of capabilities and what they're going to be able to do. The main difference between them is probably going to be the appearance. So some of them are going to be more visible, meaning that you'll see the cross tube kind of hang down below the bumper. On a vehicle like the Subaru, I don't think it's a huge deal. You know, it looks right at home, but it's hard to argue with a little bit cleaner look. You know, in my opinion, this one looks a little more factory. Everything's hidden for the most part. You're really just going to be able to see the receiver tube opening there. And so it's really just going to come down to what you think looks good on the back of your Subaru. Some of these Foresters have dual exhaust. And if yours is set up that way, the hitch is going to work with it just fine. In our case, we have the single exhaust and everything went up together as it should. So regardless of what you got, should be in pretty good shape there. And with that in mind, this is going to be a class 3 hitch. So that means it has a 2-inch by 2-inch receiver tube opening. And that's a good thing because that's a super common size and a ton of different accessories will work with it. It is going to use that standard 5/8 pin and clip. One doesn't come included with the hitch. If you need one, not a huge deal. You grab it here at eTrailer. And a lot of times too, if you end up buying a new accessory, they'll come with one. So something to look out for. The safety chain openings are a loop style and pretty easy to get to and large enough to allow us to use pretty much any size hook that our trailer might have on it. As far as the weight capacities go, the hitch is going to have a 525-pound maximum gross tongue weight rating, which is the amount of weight pushing down on the hitch. And that's a pretty high number, so you should be able to use just about any size bike rack or cargo carrier that you'd want to, for example. As far as the maximum gross trailer weight rating is concerned, that's going to be 3,500 pounds. That's the amount of weight that'll be pulling on the hitch. So that is the weight of your trailer plus anything that you might have enter on it. I do always like to recommend though, it's never a bad idea just to grab your Subaru's owner's manual. That way you can check in there and make sure that your Forester can handle that much weight safely. We'll grab a couple measurements and these will help us figure out what type of accessories will work best. If you go from the ground to the top inside edge of the receiver tube opening, that's going to be about 15.5 inches, which is good. You know, the hitch sits up nice and tight against the bottom of the car. So if your accessory has a straight shank, should be fine there. If it has a rise in it, even better, buy some more ground clearance. If you're going to be pulling a trailer around, you can probably use a ball mount that has a straight shank, or maybe even one with a slight rise, inch or so, probably work in most cases. If you go from the center of the hitch pin hole to the edge of the rear bumper, that's only going to be about 2 inches, which is really good, so you shouldn't run into really any issues here, but if need be, you can use that to help figure out exactly if any of those folding style accessories you might have can be stored upright without hitting the back of your Forester. Other than that, when it comes down to it, a hitch you really can't go wrong with. You know, it looks good and is going to be able to handle just about anything that you want to throw at it. As far as the installation goes, it's really not too bad. You will have to let the exhaust come down a little bit, which isn't a huge deal. Everything's pretty easy to get to. You get some hardware in the frame and the hitch bolts up. We ran into a couple little snags, I guess you could say, but nothing too crazy, and I'll show you a couple of things that we did to get around it, and hopefully that makes it easier on you if you plan on doing this yourself. But that said, why don't we go ahead, pull into the garage, and get going on it now. To begin our installation, we're going to be underneath the back of our Subaru, and we are going to need to let the exhaust come down a little bit. That way it'll give us some more room to work. So before we make that happen, I like to take a strap and just run it from side to side. That way we can kind of control how fast and how far we actually let the exhaust come down. To get the exhaust down, there's 3 rubber isolator hangers that'll look just like this, and you can spray them down with soapy water or some type of lubricant to make it easier. And if your vehicle happens to have dual exhaust, it'll be set up essentially the same, just on the other side. But if you have single exhaust, that's all we have to worry about. But I like to spray them down and then just kind of work the exhaust around by hand to help loosen it up like that. And then you can come in with a big pry bar or a screwdriver, whatever you got, and work one end of that hanger off like that. And so with this one done, the next one's going to be located just on this side of our muffler here. We're going to do the same thing to get this one off here. If you continue to follow the exhaust forward, here's that 3rd hanger. And once this is off, what we can do is loosen up our strap a little bit and let the exhaust come down a little ways. What we can do now is remove our heat shield. And so this is held in place with 4 10mm head bolts, just like this, so you kind of got one in each corner. In our case, on the outside corner, everything's pretty rusty and the heat shield's barely held on. I'm afraid if I remove those, I'll either break the bolt off or damage a heat shield or something like that. And so, not a huge deal. We really just need access to the bottom of our frame rail here. And these feel like they're going to come off pretty easy. I'm just going to pull these 2 out. And then essentially just kind of bend this kind of down and out of the way like that. So it turned out that the heat shield was barely holding on anyway and just kind of came right off. So I'll figure out something with that later on. Probably try to pull them bolts out, maybe use some big washers or something along them lines when we go to reinstall this. But either way, out of the way. And now we can look at the bottom of our frame rail. And from this point on, whatever we do to one side of the vehicle, we're also going to do to the other side because it'll be set up the exact same way. But you're going to have these rubber plugs, all right? And with these, you can just take a screwdriver and essentially just pop them right out of the frame. If you look on the bottom of your fascia, and on each side here, you're going to have a push pin style fastener that we can pull out. And with these, a lot of times they'll get brittle and difficult to take out. Sometimes they break, if I'm being honest with you, but one way you can potentially avoid that, if you spray some soapy water in there, and even if you have compressed air, an air gun or something, you can shoot in there to kind of clean that dirt out, and then just carefully maneuver it around. The way to get a push pin out though, you can take a flathead screwdriver like this and work the head down. Or even if you have a trim tool like this, that makes it easier sometimes. Just gonna work that fastener out just like that. These little metal tabs here where those push pins were going up through, you can take a pair of pliers or something and just kind of bend them like this out of the way a little bit, and that'll make it easier, giving us more room to get our hitch up into place. We're going to need to trim a small opening in our fascia here. That way the hitch will have room, once we put it up there. There's a diagram and instructions that you can follow, and so I drew that out. And this is somewhat thick plastic. I like to use a multi-tool to trim stuff like this, but you can use a Dremel tool, a pair of snips, utility knife. Just be careful if you use that. You don't want to get carried away. But regardless, we need to get this material removed. If you want to, you can always come back with a file or some sandpaper or something and clean up these rough edges. While we're at it, we can trim out our heat shield too. So just this little piece here essentially is what we need to remove. I'm going to use a pair of 10 snips to cut this out. And when you're doing this, just be careful. These edges can be pretty sharp. So good idea to wear a pair of gloves while you're doing this. Back underneath the vehicle now, we're looking at our frame rail, and I just changed over here to the driver's side since our exhaust isn't in the way. A lot easier to see what's going on, but like I said before, it's set up the exact same way over there. But what we're able to do is get our hardware in place. And so we're going to have 3 attachment points. We're going to be using this hole, this one, as well as this one, and then this larger hole here. That's actually going to be used as an access hole to get the hardware in the frame. As far as the hardware that we're going to use and how we're going to do it, you're going to have a pull wire. You can take the coiled end and you want to start with this hole here closest to the back of the vehicle. You put that in there though, and you push it towards that access hole. And we kind of got lucky there, it dropped out. Sometimes you'll have to reach up there and help kind of guide it out. But what you want to do is take a spacer block and a carriage bolt, all right? And that's going to thread onto the pull wire. Just like that. And you can feed that hardware up into the frame one at a time. You pull down on the fish wire until it drops down through the frame. And so I'm going to use that exact same technique and hardware combination to get the rest of the bolts in. Something that you can do as well, makes it a little easier sometimes, if you just kind of eyeball the distance there, put a bend in that fish wire, and that'll make it usually easier to get it out of the access hole there. Once your bolts are in, you can put your heat shield back in place, and you just want to use the outside bolts to hold it up. And since ours is all rusted out and whatnot, to kind of fill the gap there, I just used some fender style washers to get it bolted back up. And then the hitch is actually going to sandwich the rest of the heat shield on the frame rail, so that's how it'll be held up over here. While you're at it too, if you want to, you can always take the plug and put it back into the access hole there to keep it covered. Once we have our hitch in place, you know, the bolts are going to drop down through the openings in the hitch. The hardware that we're going to use to secure it will be the same for all the attachment points. You're going to have a conical tooth washer. Make sure that the teeth on the washer are going to face up towards the hitch. So you'll put that over the bolt, and then you'll just take a hex nut and thread that on. If you can have someone give you a hand with this and make it much easier, but you can take the hitch, put your pull wires through the holes in the hitch, and you're going to have to kind of lift up and keep this behind the fascia. And in my case here, it's wanting to hit the tab that we bent. I kind of bend that back out of the way there. It looks like too, what's going on my side at least, we got this bolt kind of protruding out. So we'll have to go up and over it. There we go. Once some bolts drop through though, remove a pull wire, take that hardware combination we talked about, and get them started. So I mentioned there was a bolt kind of interfering with the hitch when we went to put it up. And what it was hitting on each side was just this little bolt that passes through from where our bumper beam was attached. And really all I did on each side was kind of push the hitch a little bit more towards the front of the vehicle, and then take it, kind of tilt it up, and it kind of just slid into place. So you might have to maneuver it around a little bit to get it up past there, but it really wasn't too bad. And once you get all the hardware in place and hand tight, you can come back with a 3/4 or even a 19mm socket and snug everything down. You're going to make sure to come back with a torque wrench now and tighten down all of the hardware to the amount specified in the instructions. Something I noticed with the hitch up, at least over here on the passenger side, is the hitch had a hole in it that lined up with the bolt hole for our heat shield, and this one towards the front here wasn't, interfering with anything at all. And so I made the decision to take the factory bolts and just put them back in place to help keep that heat shield a little more secure. You can get our exhaust all rehung now, and when you go to put it back, you can just spray it down again, and usually just line everything up by hand. Do it that way. So I did the others already by our muffler, and with the exhaust supporting itself, go ahead and get our strap out of the way. Last but not least, don't forget to take the bumper tabs here and your push pins and get those reinstalled. And with that done, we're in pretty good shape. So that'll finish up our look at and our installation of the CURT Trailer Hitch Receiver on our 2016 Subaru Forester.